Sometimes it seems to me that the walls of the parish have absorbed more pain than joy. Behind them lie a wide variety of stories, each one unique. Recently, a woman came here. Her hands were shaking and her eyes were full of tears. I invited her to sit down and gave her time to collect her thoughts. Her story turned out to be long, full of trials and unexpected twists. But the main thing in it is the feeling of loneliness that she carried within herself for years. Today, I want to share her words with you. Here is her story. My name is Rosalind Campbell. I am 64 years old and have been retired for 3 years. I used to work as a librarian at the Central Library in Elmira, a small town in New York State, where I have lived all my life. This town was never particularly rich or famous, but it had decent schools, quiet streets, and people who knew each other by sight. My husband Robert died 5 years ago of a heart attack, leaving me a 2-story house on Maple Street with white shutters and a small garden, as well as enough savings to live comfortably and not worry about bills. We had only one daughter, Charlotte, who was born when I was 29. Robert and I had tried for a long time to have children, and when she was finally born, we decided not to take any more risks. One healthy child was enough for us. Charlotte grew up to be an obedient girl, did well in school, and went to a local college, where she met Ethan Morgan. They dated for 3 years, then got married, and now live in a small house on the other side of town. They don't have children yet, although I sometimes hint that grandchildren would be a nice gift for a grandmother. I live alone, but I try not to get depressed and turn into one of those perpetually complaining widows that everyone avoids. I go to the Baptist church on Park Avenue on Sundays, meet my friends for coffee, read detective stories and historical novels, and tend to my garden. I have a best friend, Vivian Holloway, whom I've known for 40 years. She lives 3 houses down from me and worked as a nurse at the local hospital until she retired. We often go shopping or to the movies together, discuss the town news, and sometimes treat ourselves to a glass of wine with dinner. April 23rd was Charlotte's birthday. She turned 35, an age when a woman is no longer a girl, but not yet an elderly lady. We agreed to celebrate at Mary's Kitchen on Church Street, a small family-run establishment with red and white checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh pastries, where they serve excellent homemade pies, and where we often met when Charlotte was a teenager. The owner, Mary Connolly, a plump woman with gray curls and kind eyes, had known us for over 20 years and always set a special table by the window when we came for family celebrations. I started preparing for this day in advance. First, I had to choose a gift. I usually bought my daughter something practical: a pretty blouse, a set of towels for the house, a book, or jewelry from the jewelry store in the mall. But this time, I decided to give her something special: my mother's heirloom jewelry. It was a pearl necklace with 3 large sapphires in the center and matching earrings. The jewelry was kept in my bedroom, in a small safe behind a painting, along with other family valuables. The history of these jewels dated back to the 19th century. My mother told me that her grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Winthrop, received them as a dowry when she married a grain merchant in 1887. In those days, such jewelry was a sign of wealth and status. The pearls were natural, the sapphires were real, and the gold setting was the delicate work of an unknown craftsman. Then they went to my great-grandmother Margaret, then to my grandmother Catherine, then to my mother Dorothy, and then to me. In our family, these jewels had been passed down from mother to daughter for 4 generations, and I thought long and hard about when it would be time to pass them on to Charlotte. At first, I wanted to wait until she turned 40, but then I decided that 35 was also a suitable age. She is old enough to appreciate family traditions and understand the importance of such things. Besides, I wanted to see her wear these jewels, rather than just know that they were lying in a safe, waiting for an uncertain future. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes before the appointed time, at 6:30 in the evening. It was a warm and sunny April day. The first green leaves were already appearing on the trees, and tulips and daffodils were blooming in the front gardens. I parked next to the cafe, checked that the gift was safely in my purse, and went inside. Mary greeted me like an old friend, asked about my health, showed me to our usual table by the window, and brought the menu. Although I could have ordered from memory, after so many years, I had tried almost everything here. I ordered a coffee with milk and waited. In my purse was a small dark blue velvet box with a gold clasp. I had bought it especially for this occasion at an antique shop on State Street. The old cardboard box that had held the jewelry all these years looked too worn for such a solemn moment. The new box was graceful and elegant, worthy of a family heirloom. I was more nervous than usual. I don't know why, but I had a strange feeling that this evening would not be as I had planned. Perhaps it was because Charlotte had become somewhat distracted and distant in recent months. When we talked on the phone, she often answered in monosyllables, as if she were thinking about something else. When I visited them, she was polite, but not particularly welcoming. I chalked it up to fatigue from work or the usual marital routine, but something still bothered me. Charlotte and Ethan arrived at almost the same time, but I immediately noticed that something was wrong. Usually, they would walk in together, holding hands, or at least close to each other, laughing at some shared joke or discussing plans for the evening. This time, Charlotte walked ahead with quick, decisive steps, while Ethan trailed 2 steps behind, as if they were strangers who happened to be in the same place at the same time. What's more, when they approached the table, there were no smiles, no hugs, no usual marital intimacy between them. "Happy birthday, dear!" I stood up and hugged my daughter when she approached the table. Charlotte looked good, as always. She took care of herself, went to the gym regularly, got manicures and pedicures, and had her hair done by a good hairdresser. Her dark hair was neatly styled in soft waves. Her makeup was fresh and understated, and she was wearing a blue dress with a thin strap that I had bought her for Christmas. But her smile was somehow forced, not reaching her eyes. And in her eyes, I saw something like fatigue or anxiety. "Thanks, Mom," she said, and sat down in the chair opposite me, hanging her purse on the back of the chair. Ethan nodded to me, muttered the standard greeting, and sat down next to his wife, but not close. There was a noticeable distance between them, almost the entire width of the chair. He had always been a man of few words, hard-working and reliable, one of those who does more than he says. Tall, broad-shouldered, with blonde hair and kind gray eyes, he had the strong hands of a mechanic and a calm disposition. He had been working at a local auto parts factory for over 10 years, earned a decent salary, and was considered a good specialist. He was usually calm and balanced, but today he seemed tense, constantly twisting a white paper napkin in his hands, tearing it into small pieces. "How's work, Charlotte?" I asked, trying to strike up a conversation. "Fine," my daughter replied, without even looking up from the menu. "Same as usual. What's new at the furniture store? Any interesting customers?" Charlotte worked as a sales manager at Home Comfort, a fairly large store on the outskirts of town that sold home furnishings, from kitchen sets to bedroom sets. She usually enjoyed talking about funny customers who demanded the impossible or difficult orders that she managed to fulfill successfully. She had a talent for communicating with people and enjoyed her job. "Nothing special," she shrugged, still not looking up from the menu, which she knew by heart. I exchanged glances with Ethan. He had also noticed his wife's unusual reticence and looked even more confused. We ordered our food. Charlotte had a Caesar salad with chicken. She always watched her figure and rarely allowed herself anything high in calories. Ethan chose a medium rare beefsteak with baked potatoes. He was a big man and needed hearty food after a day's work. I settled on chicken soup with noodles and vegetables. At my age, I no longer wanted to experiment with heavy food in the evenings. The conversation didn't flow from the start. I talked about my neighbors, how Mrs. Johnson had finally painted her fence, which had been peeling since last fall, how the young Davis couple had bought a new car and now proudly parked it right in front of their house. I talked about the new books that had arrived at the library, a detective series about a female investigator, and a historical saga about the Civil War. I mentioned how well the tulips were blooming in my garden this spring, the red, yellow, and white ones I had planted last fall. Charlotte nodded and occasionally interjected with, "Yes, Mom," or "That's good." But it was clear that she was thinking about something else and only half listening to me. She also kept taking out her phone to check the time, look at the screen, or quickly type something. The phone was new, with a large screen, and I noticed that notifications kept popping up on it. Messages, emails, or calls. Ethan was silent most of the time, occasionally agreeing with my stories, but mostly concentrating on cutting his steak or drinking water from his glass. Several times, I saw him glance at his wife's phone, especially when it beeped. His face became even more gloomy, and his hands clenched into fists. "Charlotte, could you put your phone away?" I asked, when she took it out again while I was telling her how our new neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had gotten 3 cats, and now they were roaming all the yards in the neighborhood. "We're celebrating your birthday. Let's spend this evening together as a family." "Sorry, Mom." "It's work. They might call about something important," my daughter replied. But she didn't put her phone away, just placed it next to her plate with the screen facing up. "At 7 in the evening? On your birthday?" I asked in surprise. "Is there really something so urgent at the store that it can't wait until tomorrow? We're having a big sale on bedroom sets right now. Lots of orders, so I have to work overtime," Charlotte explained. But her explanation sounded unconvincing. Ethan said nothing, only clenched the napkin in his hand tighter. I noticed the muscles in his jaw tense, as if he were restraining himself from saying something. An awkward silence hung between the couple, which I hastened to fill with a new story, this time about how the church was preparing for Easter services. When the main courses were served, I decided it was time to give the gift. Maybe it would help lighten the mood and bring back the joyful spirit of the holiday. I took the box out of my purse and handed it to my daughter. "This is for you, dear." I think now is the right time. Charlotte took the box with both hands, put her phone down for a second, and carefully examined the velvet surface and golden clasp. "It's a beautiful box, Mom." "Thank you." "It's not the box, it's what's inside." "Open it." She carefully lifted the lid, and her eyes widened in surprise when she saw the jewelry. Inside the box, on a soft white satin lining, lay a necklace and earrings, a pearl necklace with 3 large sapphires in the center, and matching earrings with small pearls and tiny sapphires. "Mom, these are Grandma's. They're so beautiful!" she exclaimed, and for the first time all evening, her voice sounded sincere. She took the necklace out of the box and held it up to the lamp. The pearls shimmered with a soft cream color, each pearl perfectly round and smooth. The sapphires sparkled with a deep blue color, reflecting the light of the lamp with their many facets. The gold setting was delicate and elegant, without unnecessary embellishments. The craftsmen who made these jewels more than a century ago understood the value of elegant simplicity. "They have been passed down in our family from mother to daughter for many generations," I said solemnly. "My great-great-grandmother, Elizabeth Winthrop, received them as a dowry when she got married in 1887. She was the daughter of a banker from Albany, and her husband was a grain merchant. In those days, such jewelry was a sign of wealth and good breeding. Charlotte listened attentively, turning the necklace in her hands and examining every detail. Then they went to my great-grandmother Margaret, then to my grandmother Catherine, whom you remember, then to my mother Dorothy, and then to me. And now they are yours. You will be the fifth generation of women in our family to wear these jewels. They are dear to you, Mom. Maybe it's too early, Charlotte began, but I stopped her with a gesture. It's not too early. I'm 64 years old, and I want you to wear them and enjoy them, not have them sitting in a safe doing nothing. And when you have a daughter, you'll pass them on to her. That way, the tradition will continue. At the mention of a future daughter, Charlotte and Ethan exchanged glances, quickly and somewhat guiltily. I realized I had touched on a sensitive subject. They had been married for 7 years, but still had no children. I never asked them about it directly, but sometimes hinted that grandchildren would be a wonderful gift. Perhaps they had problems conceiving, or perhaps they were consciously postponing having children until later. In any case, it was their private life, and I tried not to interfere. Try them on, I suggested. I want to see how they look on you. Charlotte put the necklace on right there in the cafe, and Ethan reluctantly helped her fasten the clasp at the back. I saw his fingers linger on her neck for a second, as he leaned in a little closer than necessary to fasten the clasp. But Charlotte quickly moved away as soon as the necklace was secure. The earrings were also perfect. They were not too big, elegant, with small pearls and tiny sapphires that sparkled beautifully in the light. The necklace lay exactly along the neckline of the blue dress, creating a refined and noble image. "How beautiful!" said Mary, who came over to look at the birthday girl. "Real family jewels! You don't see those very often these days." "Thank you, Mom." "This is the best gift ever." Charlotte leaned across the table and kissed me on the cheek. For the first time all evening, her smile seemed sincere and joyful. For a few minutes, she resembled the girl I remembered. Open, emotional, capable of genuinely enjoying gifts and surprises. But even at that moment, when she seemed truly happy, the phone vibrated again on the table. And again, as if by reflex, she immediately grabbed it, quickly read the message, and typed something in response without even apologizing. Her fingers fluttered across the screen with astonishing speed, as if she were responding to something very important and urgent. Ethan turned away from her and stared gloomily at the passers-by outside the window. His face became stony, and his eyes took on an expression I couldn't understand. A mixture of pain, anger, and some kind of doom. We spent the rest of the dinner in almost complete silence. I tried to keep the conversation going, asking about their plans for the summer, whether they were going anywhere on vacation, about the health of Ethan's parents, who lived in a neighboring town. But I only got one-word answers. Charlotte kept checking her phone, and Ethan became more and more withdrawn. When Mary brought out a small birthday cake with candles, a chocolate sponge cake with cream roses, and the words, "Happy Birthday, Charlotte," we sang the traditional Happy Birthday song. Charlotte made a wish and blew out 35 candles. But even during this simple and joyful ritual, she and Ethan avoided looking at each other. He looked at the cake. She looked somewhere else, toward the window. "What did you wish for?" I asked, as I always did when my daughter was a child. "If I tell you, it won't come true," my daughter replied with a sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. We ate cake, drank coffee, and I realized that the evening was coming to an end. The celebration didn't turn out the way I had planned. Instead of joy and family warmth, there was tension in the air that you could cut with a knife. When Charlotte went to the bathroom, I decided to talk to Ethan. We stayed at the table together, and I leaned closer to him so I could speak more quietly. Ethan, what's going on? You both seem distant today. It's Charlotte's birthday, but you look like you're at a funeral. He sighed heavily and rubbed his temples with his hands. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in a long time. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his eyes had a lost look in them. We're going through some temporary difficulties, Rosalind. In our relationship, what kind of difficulties? Did you have a fight about something? We didn't fight. It's worse than that. We've grown apart. Charlotte has become a completely different person. We used to talk about everything, spend evenings together, make plans for the future, dream about children, about how we would decorate our home. Now she's always gone somewhere, staying late at work, meeting up with friends, saying she's tired and wants to be alone. Have you tried talking to her about it? Of course I have. But she says everything is fine, that I'm making up problems out of thin air, that she's just going through a stressful period at work. Maybe that's true. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or I don't understand. I looked at this kind, honest man who sincerely loved my daughter, and I felt sorry for him. I could see how upset he was, how he was trying to understand what was happening to his marriage, how he was trying to find a way to fix everything. Ethan, how long ago did this start? About 4 months ago, maybe a little more. At first, I thought she was just going through a temporary stressful period. The store was doing inventory, then they started preparing for the spring sale, so there was a lot of work. But then it only got worse. She started getting annoyed over little things, and we almost stopped talking in the evenings. She used to tell me about work, about customers. We discussed the news, made plans for the weekend. Now she comes home, eats dinner in silence, and immediately goes to watch TV or sits with that damn phone. And that phone, does she really never put it down? You can see for yourself. She used to be able to leave it at home and not even notice. Now she checks it every 5 minutes. And these constant messages, calls. She says it's work, but what kind of work at 9 in the evening? On the weekend? On vacation? On vacation? Have you been somewhere recently? No, but she's planning to. She says she wants to get away, that she's tired, and needs a change of scenery. I offered to go with her, but she said she wants to go alone, or with a friend. We've been married for 7 years, Rosalind, and she wants to go on vacation without me. There was so much pain in his voice that I wanted to hug this big, strong man like a little child. He was clearly suffering, but didn't know how to deal with the situation. Maybe she really has important things to do at work. I tried to find a rational explanation, although I didn't really believe it myself. Rosalind, I don't want to sound paranoid, but sometimes I feel like she's hiding something. These constant delays at work, meetings with friends, secrecy with her phone. And yesterday, I accidentally saw her hiding the screen from me when she was typing a message. Why hide it if it's just work? I didn't know what to say. It had been exactly 2 weeks since Charlotte's birthday, and I still couldn't forget the strange tension that hung in the air that evening. Every time I remembered how my daughter constantly checked her phone, how she avoided looking at her husband, how she answered my questions in monosyllables, I got an unpleasant feeling in my chest. Something was definitely wrong in their marriage, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to interfere without being invited. May 7th was an unusually warm and sunny day. Spring had come early that year. The trees were already covered in young green leaves. Tulips and daffodils were blooming in the front gardens, and the air was filled with that special scent of awakening nature that always lifted my spirits. After a long winter, which always seems endless in New York, such days were especially precious. Around 11 in the morning, I got a call from Vivian Holloway, my best friend for 40 years. Vivian was 2 years younger than me, but she looked younger than her 62 years. A slim, fit woman with short gray hair and lively brown eyes. She had worked as a nurse at a local hospital until she retired 3 years ago, and since then, She had become even more active than when she was working. She was always up to something: painting classes, a group studying the history of the city, volunteer work at an animal shelter. "Rosalind, what are your plans for today?" she asked in her energetic voice. "Would you like to take a walk downtown? The weather is just divine, and I haven't been to the antique shops in a long time. I want to see if there's anything interesting." Vivian was a passionate lover of antiques. In her house, you could find Victorian vases, old leather-bound books, vintage jewelry, and 19th century porcelain figurines. She knew the history of every item in her collection and could talk for hours about where and when she had acquired them. I didn't share her enthusiasm to the same extent, but I enjoyed spending time with her, and a walk through the city center seemed like a good idea. Of course, Vivian. What time shall we meet?" "Let's meet at 1 p.m. by the fountain on Main Street. First, we'll browse the antique shops, then we'll visit that new bookstore everyone's talking about, and finally, we'll have coffee at Starbucks." I agreed, and after lunch, we met at the appointed place. The center of Elmira has changed significantly in recent years. Old buildings have been renovated, new shops and cafes have appeared, and the main street has become a pedestrian zone with beautiful flower beds and benches. The city authorities were clearly trying to attract tourists and make the center more appealing to local residents. Vivian was dressed in a light blue blouse and dark jeans, with a large leather bag slung over her shoulder, in which she always carried a magnifying glass for examining small details on antique items, a price guide, and a small notebook for taking notes. She looked like a real pro, ready for some serious treasure hunting. "Ready for an adventure?" She smiled as we greeted each other. "Of course. Where shall we go first?" "Let's start with Time and Memory on Church Street. It recently changed owners, and I heard that he brought a lot of interesting things from an estate somewhere in Connecticut." We walked slowly down Main Street, enjoying the warm sun and light breeze. The street was quite busy. People were out for walks after a long winter, young mothers were pushing strollers, and retirees were sitting on benches feeding pigeons. On days like this, Elmira seemed like an almost idyllic place to live. Quiet, peaceful, safe. The Time and Memory antique shop was located in an old late 19th century building with tall windows and a brick facade. Inside, it smelled of old wood, dust, and that special scent of time that is always present in such places. The shelves were filled with a wide variety of items, from antique clocks and silver candlesticks to vintage dresses and military medals. The new owner, a man in his 50s with a beard and attentive eyes, told us about a recent arrival. Indeed, the collection was impressive. Victorian furniture, Chinese porcelain, paintings in gilded frames, and a multitude of jewelry from different eras. Vivian immediately immersed herself in studying the antique brooches, while I wandered between the shelves, looking at books and photographs. I have always been interested in imagining who these things belonged to before, what stories they had, and why their owners decided to part with them. Half an hour later, we left the store. Vivian bought a silver Victorian brooch with cameos, while I limited myself to browsing. The next stop on our route was Vintage and Style on State Street, which specialized in clothing and accessories from past decades. "Now let's go to the pawn shop," Vivian suggested as we passed the Golden Hands sign. "I haven't been there in a long time, and sometimes you can find real treasures in pawn shops." The Golden Hands pawn shop was located in a small one-story building between a barber shop and a stationery store. I rarely went into places like that. Something about them made me uncomfortable. Perhaps the thought that people were forced to part with things dear to them because of financial difficulties. But Vivian was right. Sometimes you could really find interesting items there at reasonable prices. The pawn shop owner, a heavy-set man of about 45 with receding hair and a thick mustache, looked up from his newspaper when we entered. The room was quite cramped. The display cases along the walls were filled with a wide variety of items: musical instruments, electronics, tools, sports equipment, and of course, jewelry. Welcome, ladies! Are you looking for something specific or just browsing? He asked in a friendly manner. Just browsing, if you don't mind, replied Vivian. We're interested in antique jewelry. Of course, I don't mind. Over there, in the corner display case, we recently received some interesting items. You can take a look. We approached the display case, and I immediately froze in shock. On a black velvet stand, under a bright lamp, lay my family jewelry. A pearl necklace with 3 sapphires and matching earrings. At first, I thought I was imagining things. It couldn't be the same jewelry I had given Charlotte just 2 weeks ago. But the longer I looked, the more convinced I became that it was indeed the same. The pearls had the same creamy hue. The sapphires sparkled with the same deep blue color, and the gold setting was just as delicate and elegant. Vivian, I whispered, grabbing my friend's arm. Look at this jewelry! She turned to me and immediately noticed my shock. What's wrong, Rosaline? You're as pale as a sheet. That's my jewelry. The same jewelry I gave Charlotte for her birthday. Vivian looked closely at the necklace and earrings and frowned. Are you sure? Maybe they're just similar? I'm 100% sure. Look at the center sapphire. See the small scratch on the left? It's been there for years. And this pearl, the third from the left, is slightly larger than the others. These are definitely my jewelry. My heart was beating so hard that I was afraid it would jump out of my chest. The most terrible thoughts were swarming in my head. Had Charlotte's jewelry been stolen? Or had she lost it? But then why didn't she call me and tell me what had happened? Excuse me, I said to the pawn shop owner, trying to speak as calmly as possible. Can you tell me when this jewelry came in? The man came over to us and looked at the display case. Ah, pearls and sapphires. Beautiful work. Very high-quality stones. They were brought in a week ago, on Monday, I think. Or Tuesday. I don't remember exactly, but recently. Who brought them in? I asked, feeling my voice tremble. The pawn shop owner looked at me intently. Why do you need to know if it's not a secret? The thing is, these jewels are very similar to a family heirloom that recently disappeared from our home. We suspect theft and are ready to go to the police. It wasn't true, but I couldn't tell the truth, that my own daughter might have sold the gift I gave her. I see, the man nodded. Well, in that case, I can tell you. They were brought in by a young woman, about 35 years old, with shoulder-length dark hair, quite pretty. She said they were inherited from her grandmother, but she needed money, so she decided to sell them. High-quality work, real pearls and sapphires. I gave her $2,700 in cash, and now I'm selling them for $4,000. The description matched Charlotte perfectly. Dark hair down to her shoulders, 35 years old, pretty. And even the story about her grandmother's inheritance was technically true, although her grandmother was still alive and had given the jewelry to her daughter herself. Do you have any documents? A passport, for example? Asked Vivian, who clearly understood the seriousness of the situation. Of course! We always require documents when accepting goods. But I can't show them to strangers. If you really believe this is your jewelry, contact the police. They will come with a warrant, and then I will show you all the documents. I nodded, thanked her, and quickly left the pawn shop. Outside, I stopped by a wall and closed my eyes, trying to calm down and make sense of what was happening. Vivian stood next to me, putting her hand on my shoulder. Rosalind, what does this mean? Did Charlotte sell the jewelry herself? I don't know, I whispered. I hope not. Maybe they really were stolen and she's afraid to admit it. Or maybe she lost them and now doesn't know how to tell me. Then why didn't she go to the police? Why is she keeping quiet? I didn't know what to say. There were too many strange things about this whole story. If the jewelry had been stolen, Charlotte would have called me. She knew how important it was to me. If she had lost it, she would have told me, even if it was late. But her silence in this situation seemed suspicious. I need to talk to her, I said finally. Find out what happened. I took out my phone and dialed Charlotte's number. The phone rang and rang, but no one answered. I tried again, same result. The phone was on, but my daughter wasn't picking up. She's not answering, I told Vivian. I'll try calling Ethan at work. I knew the factory number by heart. I sometimes called there when I couldn't reach my daughter and needed to convey something urgently. The secretary in the personnel department knew me and was always ready to help. Elmira Auto Parts Factory, Personnel Department, answered a familiar female voice. Hello, this is Rosalind Campbell, Charlotte Morgan's mother. Could I speak to Ethan Morgan, please? Of course, Mrs. Campbell. I'll connect you to the workshop a minute later. Ethan answered the phone. His voice sounded tired but friendly, as always. Hello, Rosalind. Is something wrong? Hello, Ethan. I've been trying to reach Charlotte, but she's not answering. Do you know where she is? There was a short pause, and I heard him sigh. Rosalind, Charlotte is on a business trip. She went to Chicago for 2 weeks for work. She said a new branch was opening, and she was sent to help with sales. It was like a bolt of lightning. Charlotte was on a business trip, and her jewelry was at a local pawn shop. That could only mean one thing. She sold them before she left, got the money, and went on her so-called business trip. When did she leave? I asked, trying not to show my excitement. Monday morning. She said her flight was early, so she wouldn't wake me up. I woke up and she was gone. There was only a note in the kitchen with an explanation. Monday. That was when, according to the pawn shop owner, someone brought in the jewelry. Everything added up. Did she call from Chicago? A couple of times. Briefly, she said that everything was fine, that she had a lot of work, that she missed me. But the conversations were somehow distant. She was always in a hurry to end the conversation. I see. Sorry for distracting you from your work. I just wanted to clarify something about the birthday present. Don't worry, Rosalind. By the way, she was very happy with the jewelry. She kept saying how beautiful they were, how proud she was that they were hers now. Those words were like a knife in my heart. Charlotte said she was proud of the jewelry, but she sold it a few days after receiving it. I said goodbye to Ethan and put my phone in my purse. Vivian had been standing nearby the whole time and heard my side of the conversation. What did he say? She asked. Charlotte is supposedly on a business trip to Chicago. She left on Monday morning. Supposedly. Vivian, the jewelry was brought to the pawn shop on Monday, the very day she left. That can't be a coincidence. We slowly walked down the street toward downtown. I felt cheated and betrayed. My own daughter had sold a family heirloom that I had given her with all my heart, then lied to her husband and left for parts unknown under the guise of a business trip. Maybe she really did have serious financial problems, Vivian suggested. Maybe she didn't want to upset you and Ethan, so she decided to take care of it herself. $2,700? That's a lot of money, but it's still strange to sell family jewelry. And if she and Ethan are having money problems, why doesn't he know anything about it? Then what could it be? I didn't want to say what I was thinking out loud. Charlotte's strange behavior in recent months, constant messages on her phone, coldness toward her husband, desire to go on vacation alone, and now the sale of jewelry and a mysterious business trip. It all added up to a very unpleasant picture. I don't know, Vivian, but I'll definitely find out. We reached the cafe, but neither Vivian nor I was in the mood for a friendly chat over coffee. I asked my friend to walk me to my car. I needed to be alone and think about what to do next. Rosalind, maybe you should talk to one of Charlotte's friends? Vivian suggested before we parted. Maybe they know more than Ethan does. It was a good idea. Charlotte had a best friend, Tessa Brooks, whom she had known since school. If anyone knew the truth about what was going on in my daughter's life, it was her. I thanked Vivian for her advice and drove home. All the way home, I thought about how Charlotte had changed in recent months, how strange she had been at her birthday party, how she had avoided talking to me. Now it all made sense. Maybe she had been planning to sell the jewelry back then, in the cafe, and that was why she had been so distracted and nervous. At home, I sat down in my favorite chair by the window and tried to collect my thoughts. Whatever was going on in Charlotte's life, whatever problems she had, selling the family jewelry was a betrayal. These weren't just jewels, they were our family history, a link between generations. And she threw it all away for $800. I took out my phone and tried to call my daughter again. Again, long beeps, again, no answer. Then I wrote a short message. Charlotte, I need to talk to you. It's very important. Please call me. There was no reply. In the evening, I tried again. Same result. It was clear that Charlotte was avoiding talking to me for some reason, and that only reinforced my suspicion that something serious was going on. Before going to bed, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the dark street and thinking that tomorrow I would definitely go to Tessa Brooks. If my daughter didn't want to talk to me, I would find out the truth some other way. No matter how bitter that truth might be, I spent the next day in agonizing reflection. All night I tossed and turned in bed, imagining all sorts of scenarios about what could have happened to the jewelry. Maybe Charlotte really had her purse stolen with the jewelry in it, and she was afraid to admit it? Or maybe she lost it somewhere and now didn't know how to tell me? But the more I thought about it, the less likely these explanations seemed. There were too many coincidences. The jewelry appeared at the pawn shop on the very day my daughter left on her business trip. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore and dialed Charlotte's number again. This time, to my surprise, she answered after the third ring. Hello, Mom! Her voice sounded tense, as if she was expecting an unpleasant conversation. Charlotte, finally! I've been trying to reach you all day yesterday. How are things in Chicago? Everything's fine, she replied curtly. I have a lot of work and no time at all. What's going on? You sound upset. There was something false in her voice. Charlotte was usually more talkative, especially when she talked about work. Now every word seemed forced. Honey, I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember the jewelry I gave you for your birthday? There was a long pause. I could hear music playing in the background. Something light, resort-like, not at all like the sounds of an office or hotel. Of course I remember. What about them? Where are they now? You didn't take them with you on your business trip, did you? No, of course not. Why would I need jewelry on a business trip? They're at home in a box. I took a deep breath. Now came the hardest part. Charlotte, I have something to tell you. Yesterday, I was downtown with Vivian, and we went into the Golden Hands pawn shop. There, in the window, I saw my jewelry. The very jewelry I gave you. Again, there was silence, but this time it was long and heavy. The music in the background suddenly stopped, as if someone had turned off the radio. Mom, that's impossible. You must be mistaken. There are many similar pieces of jewelry. Charlotte, I'm not mistaken. I know these jewelry better than my own hands. The central sapphire has a small scratch, and the third pearl on the left is larger than the others. These are definitely the jewelry I gave you. Mom, I don't understand what you're talking about. The salesperson said that a young dark-haired woman brought them in on Monday. The same day you left on your business trip. Charlotte, what's going on? There were a few short beeps on the line. She hung up. I immediately called back, but the phone was unavailable. I tried again 10 minutes later. Same result. It was clear that my daughter had turned off her phone and was no longer going to talk to me. That was the worst part. If the jewelry had really been stolen or lost, Charlotte would have been upset and grateful that I had found it. But her reaction, first the lie, then the dropped call, and the disconnected phone, suggested that she was hiding the truth, and that truth was apparently very unpleasant. I sat down in a chair and tried to calm down. I had to act sensibly, not give in to my emotions. Vivian was right. I should talk to Charlotte's friends. Maybe they knew something that would help me figure out the situation. Tessa Brooks lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, not far from the supermarket where she worked as a cashier. She and Charlotte had been friends since school, and I had known Tessa practically her whole life. A short, plump woman with red curls and freckles, she had always been good-natured and open. Unlike my daughter, who had become more reserved after marriage, Tessa remained simple and sincere. I arrived at her house around 4 in the afternoon. Tessa's house was recognizable from a distance. Huge sunflowers grew in front of it, and pots of bright flowers stood on the porch. She had always loved gardening and knew how to turn even the most modest plot into a blooming paradise. Tessa greeted me with surprise, but as warmly as ever. "Mrs. Campbell!" What a pleasant surprise. "Come in. I was just making tea." Her kitchen was small but cozy. Herbs grew in pots on the windowsill: basil, parsley, mint. There was a vase of wildflowers on the table, and the aroma of fresh baking wafted from the oven. "Thank you, Tessa. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Charlotte." "What about her?" Tessa set cups and saucers with cookies on the table. "She's on a business trip to Chicago right now." "Yes, I know. But I have some questions, and I hope you can help me." Tessa sat down opposite me and looked at me intently. A look of caution appeared in her eyes. "What questions?" I told her the story about the jewelry, how I found it at the pawn shop, how I talked to the salesman, how Charlotte hung up when I asked her about it. Tessa listened silently, nodding from time to time, and I could see her expression change from surprise to concern, and then to something like guilt. "Tessa, I know you and Charlotte are close friends. If you know anything, please tell me. I'm very worried about my daughter, Mrs. Campbell. Tessa hesitated, twirling the cup in her hands. "I don't know if I should get involved in other people's family affairs. Tessa, I'm not asking you to interfere. I'm asking you to help me understand what's going on with my daughter. She sold family jewelry that had been passed down in our family for over a century and lied to me about it. Do you really think that's normal?" Tessa sighed and looked away. "She told me not to tell you." "Tell you what?" "Oh, about her personal life. She said she'd deal with it herself when she was ready." My heart began to beat faster. So something was really going on, and Tessa knew about it. "Tessa, please. I'm her mother. I have a right to know if she has serious problems." "Problems?" Tessa smiled bitterly. "You could say that." She stood up, walked over to the window, and stared at her garden for a long time. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Campbell, if I tell you, will you promise not to tell Charlotte where you heard it?" "I promise." "And you won't blame me for keeping it to myself for so long?" "I won't." "Just tell me the truth." Tessa sat back down at the table and folded her hands. "Charlotte is having an affair. It's been going on for 6 months, maybe more." Although somewhere deep down, I had expected to hear something like this, the words still hit me like a bolt of lightning. My daughter was cheating on her husband. Kind, honest Ethan, who loved her so much and tried to understand what was going on with her. "With whom?" I asked quietly. "A coworker. His name is Derek Wilson. He's a manager at the same store. He's single, 32 years old. Charlotte says she fell in love with him at first sight. Does Ethan know?" "No. Charlotte is very careful. They mostly meet at work, after the store closes, or at a motel outside of town. Ethan doesn't suspect a thing. I tried to digest this information. So, all the strange behavior my daughter had been exhibiting over the past few months, constantly being late for work, being secretive about her phone, being cold to her husband, was all related to an affair. What about the jewelry? I asked. Why did she sell it? Tessa hesitated again. Mrs. Campbell, you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. Go ahead. Charlotte isn't on a business trip to Chicago. She's in the Bahamas, with Derek. They flew out on Monday morning. My world turned upside down. My daughter wasn't just cheating on her husband. She lied to him about the business trip, sold my family jewelry, and flew off to a resort with her lover. The Bahamas? I asked weakly. Derek had wanted to go there for a long time. He said it was his dream, but he didn't have enough money for such a trip. So Charlotte decided to sell the jewelry and buy tickets for both of them. For $2,700? Yes, that was just enough for the tickets and a week's hotel stay. Charlotte organized and paid for everything herself. I closed my eyes and tried to hold back the tears. My daughter had betrayed not only her husband, but me too. She sold a family heirloom for a vacation with her lover. How long are they planning to stay there? 2 weeks. They should be back on Sunday. And then what? Is she going to tell Ethan the truth? Tessa shrugged. I don't know. She says she hasn't decided yet. Either get a divorce or try to save the marriage and end the relationship with Derek. What's your advice? I tried to talk her out of this trip. I told her it was crazy, that Ethan is a good man and doesn't deserve to be treated this way, but she won't listen. She says that for the first time in her life, she feels truly alive. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I tried to process everything I had heard. My daughter, whom I had raised to be honest and decent, had become a completely different person. A liar, a cheater, capable of betraying those closest to her for a moment of pleasure. Tessa, I finally said, are you sure she really loves this Derek? Or is it just a fling? I don't know, Mrs. Campbell. She says she loves him, but I think she's just tired of family life, of the routine. Derek is something new for her, an adventure. She doesn't think about what will happen when the novelty wears off. And him? Is he serious about her? I doubt it. He's had affairs with married women before. Charlotte isn't the first, and I'm afraid she won't be the last. That was even worse. My daughter was destroying her marriage for a man who might not even want to spend his life with her. Tessa, thank you for telling me the truth. I know it was difficult. Mrs. Campbell, what are you going to do now? Good question. What does a mother do when she finds out her daughter is committing such a betrayal? Keep quiet and hope everything will work itself out? Or intervene and try to prevent a disaster? I don't know yet, I replied honestly. But thank you for your honesty. I said goodbye to Tessa and drove home. On the way, one thought kept running through my head. Ethan had to know the truth. This good, honest man had a right to know what his wife was doing behind his back. But on the other hand, it meant the destruction of a family, divorce, pain for everyone. At home, I sat in the living room for a long time, looking at the photos on the mantelpiece. Charlotte as a child, at school, at graduation, at her wedding to Ethan. When did she become like this? When did she lose her conscience and her ability to think about other people? I took out my phone and wrote her a message. Charlotte, I know everything. About Derek, about the Bahamas, about the jewelry. I'm very ashamed of you. If you don't tell Ethan the truth yourself, I will have to do it. I sent it and waited for a reply. Now my daughter had to make a choice. Either she would confess her infidelity to her husband herself, or I would tell him the truth. Either way, the lie had to end. After sending the message to Charlotte, I couldn't sit still at home. Thoughts raced through my head like birds in a cage, and my hands trembled with nervous tension. I knew I had taken a decisive step, after which there would be no turning back. But it was impossible to remain silent any longer. Ethan had a right to know the truth about what his wife had been doing. Around 7 in the evening, I couldn't take it anymore and called Vivian. I needed to talk to someone, to share the burden that had fallen on me after my conversation with Tessa. Vivian, can you come over right now? I really need to talk. Of course, Rosalind. Did something happen? You seemed upset yesterday after the pawn shop. Yes, something happened. And it's worse than I thought. Vivian arrived 20 minutes later. She entered the house with a worried look on her face, went straight to the kitchen, and put the kettle on. Tell me what happened, she said, taking cups out of the cupboard. What did you find out about Charlotte? I told her everything, about the conversation with my daughter, who hung up on me, about the visit to Tessa's, about the affair with Derek, about the trip to the Bahamas under the guise of a business trip. Vivian listened silently, only occasionally shaking her head or clicking her tongue in disapproval. My goodness, Rosalind, she said when I finished. I thought stories like this only happened in television series nowadays. Is Charlotte really capable of such deception? Apparently so. Not only is she cheating on her husband, but she also sold my family jewelry to pay for a romantic vacation with her lover. And Ethan is sitting at home, thinking his wife is on a business trip. What are you going to do? I wrote her a message. I let her know that I know the truth and demanded that she tell Ethan herself. If she doesn't, I will. Vivian stirred her tea thoughtfully with a spoon. Rosalind, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Maybe you should give her a chance to figure things out for herself. Give her a chance? I exclaimed. Vivian, she's been cheating on her husband for 6 months. How much more time should we give her? A year? 2? And Ethan should continue to live in ignorance and suffer, not understanding why his wife has become cold towards him? But if you tell him the truth, their marriage will definitely fall apart. Hasn't it already fallen apart? What kind of marriage is it when one person is cheating and the other doesn't know about it? It's just a farce, Vivian. Ethan is a good man. He deserves honesty. My friend sighed. You're probably right. I just feel sorry for everyone. Ethan, Charlotte, and you. Things like this always hurt everyone involved. Pain is inevitable, but honest pain is better than lies and deception. We sat in the kitchen for another hour, discussing the situation. Vivian said she had noticed strange behavior in Charlotte for a long time. How she avoided family gatherings, how she became distracted and distant. Now everything fell into place. You know what upsets me the most? I said. It's not the betrayal, not the deception, but the fact that she sold the jewelry. It was a betrayal not only of Ethan, but of me and our whole family. These pieces of jewelry had been passed down from generation to generation, and she turned them into money for a resort romance. Maybe she didn't understand how much they meant to you? Vivian! I explained it to her. I told her the story of every pearl, every sapphire. I told her that they were a link between the generations of our family. And what did she do? She took them to a pawn shop like they were some kind of useless jewelry. At 8:30, my phone rang. Charlotte's name appeared on the screen. My heart beat faster. That meant she had received my message. Hello, I answered coldly. Mom, please don't do this. My daughter's voice was full of tears and despair. I know I did wrong, but give me time to fix it. Time? Charlotte, you've been lying to your husband for 6 months. How much more time do you need? I'll explain everything to Ethan when I get back. I promise. Just don't tell him now, please. Give me a chance to do it myself. Where are you now? At a business hotel in Chicago? I couldn't resist the sarcasm. Mom, I'm in the Bahamas with Derek, but it's not what you think. What do I think, Charlotte? That you sold my family jewelry to go on vacation with your lover, while lying to your husband about a business trip. Am I right? Mom, I'm in love. Can't you understand that? For the first time in my life, I feel truly happy. Through deception and betrayal? Is that your happiness, Charlotte? Please wait until Sunday. I'll come back and tell Ethan everything myself. Give me a chance to do it right. Right? Was selling the family heirloom right? Was lying to your husband right? Mom, I beg you! Don't ruin my life. Charlotte, you're ruining your own life. With your own hands, I hung up and turned off my phone. Vivian looked at me with sympathy. Difficult conversation? She cried and begged me to wait until Sunday. She promised to tell Ethan everything herself. But I don't believe her anymore, Vivian. There have been too many lies already. What have you decided? I'm going to Ethan's, right now. He should hear the truth from me, not from his wife, who will find a way to embellish or distort everything. Vivian nodded. You're probably right. But be careful. Ethan is a good man. But when a man finds out about his wife's infidelity, his reaction can be unpredictable. I thanked my friend for her support and drove to the factory. It was almost 10 o'clock in the evening, but I knew that Ethan sometimes stayed late at work, especially when no one was waiting for him at home. The factory operated in 3 shifts, and there was always someone on duty in the mechanical workshop. The security guard at the gate recognized me. I had been there several times before when I needed to deliver something to Ethan. Good evening, Mrs. Campbell. To my brother-in-law? Yes. Is he still at work? Yes, in the 3rd workshop. He's fixing something and is running late. Go ahead. You know the way I walked through the factory grounds to the mechanical workshop. The sound of machines working and the clanging of metal came from the open gate. Ethan was standing at a large workbench, bent over some kind of part. He was wearing overalls, his face smeared with machine oil, his hands gloved. When he saw me, he looked up in surprise. Rosalind? What are you doing here so late? Has something happened? Ethan, I need to talk to you. It's very important. He took off his gloves and wiped his hands with a rag. Of course. Let's go to the foreman's office. It's quieter there. We went into a small room next to the workshop. Ethan turned on the light, offered me the only chair, and remained standing. What's wrong, Rosalind? You look upset. I took a deep breath. This was probably the most difficult conversation of my life. Ethan, what I'm about to say will be very painful for you, but you need to know his face became serious. Is this about Charlotte? Yes. Ethan, she's not on a business trip to Chicago. She's in the Bahamas. With another man, he was silent for a few seconds, as if he didn't understand my words. What did you say? Charlotte is at a resort with her lover. She's been having an affair for 6 months with a colleague named Derek. She lied to you about the business trip. Ethan slowly sank down onto a toolbox that was standing against the wall. Rosalind, that's impossible. Charlotte couldn't have. She called me from Chicago, told me about work. Ethan, remember the jewelry I gave her for her birthday? The family heirloom with pearls and sapphires? Of course I remember. She was so happy. Yesterday, I happened to see them at the Golden Hands pawn shop. The salesman said a young dark-haired woman brought them in on Monday, the day Charlotte supposedly left on a business trip. She sold them for $2,700 and used the money to buy tickets to the Bahamas for herself and her lover. Ethan's face turned white as chalk. No, that can't be. I spoke to her friend Tessa. She told me everything. The affair has been going on for 6 months. His name is Derek Wilson, and he works at the same furniture store. They're supposed to be back on Sunday. Ethan covered his face with his hands. My God! I thought we were just going through a rough patch. I thought she was stressed out at work, but she's been… Ethan, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this. But you had a right to know the truth. He raised his head. There was so much pain in his eyes that I wanted to hug him like a son. All these months, when she said she was staying late at work, when she didn't want to go on vacation with me, when she was constantly checking her phone. All this time she was with him? I'm afraid so. Ethan stood up and began pacing around the small room. I could see the different emotions fighting inside him. Pain, anger, disbelief, despair. And I, like a fool, thought I was doing something wrong. His voice grew louder. I bought her flowers, cooked dinner, tried to be the best husband. And she was laughing at me. Ethan, calm down. How can I calm down? He slammed his fist on the workbench. 7 years of marriage. For 7 years, I thought we loved each other. And all this time, she was planning how to cheat on me. She wasn't always like this. Something changed in her over the last few months. What changed? She met someone better. That's what changed. His voice was filled with rage. And my jewelry? God, how could she sell a gift you gave her? How could she be so... He couldn't find the words, just clenched his fists. Ethan, I understand how you feel right now. But try not to do anything rash. Think about how you want to proceed. Proceed? He laughed bitterly. What is there to think about? She made her choice. She chose another man over me and spent your family jewelry on a romantic trip with him. What choice is there? I realized I had said everything I wanted to say. Ethan knew the truth, and now he needed time to decide what to do with it. Ethan, if you need to talk or need help, call me anytime. You're like a son to me, and I don't want you to be alone with this pain. He nodded without looking up. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you for telling me the truth. It's better to know than to live a lie. I said goodbye and left the workshop. On the way home, I thought about how I had done the right thing by telling Ethan about his wife's infidelity. But that didn't make me feel any better. I knew that my daughter had lost the best man she could have found. And all for a fleeting affair with a man who may not even have intended to spend his life with her. 4 days had passed since my conversation with Ethan. 4 long days during which I was tormented by doubts. Had I done the right thing by telling him the truth? On the one hand, he had a right to know about his wife's infidelity. On the other hand, I had destroyed my daughter's family, perhaps forever. I tried to call Charlotte, but her phone was still unavailable. I called Ethan several times, but he didn't answer. Apparently, he didn't want to talk to anyone. Vivian came every day, brought food, and tried to cheer me up, but I felt guilty about everything that was happening. On Friday evening, around 11 o'clock, when I was about to go to bed, the doorbell rang. At first quietly, then more insistently. I looked out the window and saw a taxi standing at the gate with its headlights on. When I opened the door, I saw Charlotte. But this was not the confident woman I had known all my life. Standing in front of me was a disheveled, drunk, and sobbing daughter. Her hair was tangled, her makeup was smeared across her face, and her white blouse was wrinkled and stained. She was holding a small suitcase in her hand, which she had apparently thrown right onto the porch. "Mom," she sobbed. "Mom, please. I have nowhere to go." The smell of alcohol emanating from her was so strong that I grimaced. The taxi driver appeared behind Charlotte. "Lady, pay for the ride from the airport," he said wearily. I took the money out of my wallet and paid the taxi driver. When the car drove away, we were left alone on the porch under the light of a street lamp. "Charlotte, what are you doing here? You weren't supposed to come back until Sunday." "He dumped me," my daughter sobbed. "Derek dumped me right at the resort. He said I drink too much and cry too much about my husband, that he came to relax, not listen to my problems." She tried to go inside, but I blocked her way. "What about Ethan? Did you talk to him?" Charlotte's face contorted with a new wave of tears. He changed the locks. I came home and my keys don't work. My things are in boxes on the porch. The neighbors are watching. Everyone can see my shame. He threw your things out? Everything. Clothes, books, cosmetics, everything in cardboard boxes. And there's a note on the door. The divorce papers will be ready tomorrow. Don't try to contact me anymore. How could he do this to me, Mom? I looked at my daughter and couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had been cheating on her husband for 6 months, sold the family jewelry, lied to him about her business trip, and now she was upset that he didn't want to forgive her. Charlotte, what did you expect? That Ethan would wait for you with flowers after he found out the truth? I thought he would give me a chance to explain. We've been together for 7 years. Doesn't that mean anything? Did it mean anything to you when you were seeing Derek? Charlotte wiped her nose with her sleeve. Mom, please don't start lecturing me. I feel terrible right now. Can I stay at your place tonight? Tomorrow, I'll figure out what to do next. I looked at my daughter, drunk, disheveled, complaining about the consequences of her own actions, and suddenly I realized that I didn't want to let her into the house. Not in this state, not with this attitude toward what was happening. No, Charlotte, I won't let you in the house. She looked up at me with surprise. What? Mom, I'm your daughter. I have nowhere to sleep. You are my daughter, but you betrayed not only Ethan, but me too. You sold my family jewelry to go to a resort with your lover. It was a betrayal of our entire family. Mom, I'll explain. I'll pay you back. What money, Charlotte? You spent it all on Derek, who dumped you. And the jewelry is now at the pawn shop, and it's worth $4,000. My daughter's face turned pale. 4,000! But I only got 2,700 for them. 2,700, I corrected her. And now, to buy them back, you have to pay 4,000. Do you have that kind of money? Charlotte was silent, her head bowed. Exactly. That's why I won't let you into the house until you return the jewelry. That's the only condition. But where will I get $4,000? I don't have that kind of money. That's your problem, Charlotte. You sold them, so you return them. My daughter looked up at me, her eyes full of tears and anger. So my own mother is throwing me out on the street because of some jewelry? Not because of the jewelry, but because of what it represents. It was a link between the generations of our family, a story that you turned into money for your lover. Lover? Charlotte boiled over. I fell in love! It happens to people. Fell in love. And where is your love now? Why are you standing on my porch alone while your lover is having fun in the Bahamas? We had a fight. But it's temporary. Once I sort out the divorce, we'll be back together. I shook my head. My daughter was living in a world of illusion, unwilling to see reality. Charlotte, go to Tessa's, or get a room in a motel, but I won't let you back in the house without the jewelry. You're cruel, she cried. I'm your daughter, and you're throwing me out like a dog. Because of some old trinkets. Those trinkets mean more to me than you can understand. And you threw them away for a man who didn't even want to finish his vacation with you. Charlotte grabbed her suitcase. Fine, I'll live without your help. And don't ask me to come back. You lost your daughter because of your jewelry. I lost my daughter the day she decided to sell it, I replied calmly. Charlotte turned and walked away, dragging her suitcase along the path. At the gate, she turned and shouted, I hope your jewelry keeps you warm in your old age. Then she disappeared into the darkness. I went into the house and locked the door. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt empty and painful. I knew I had done the right thing, but that didn't make me feel any better. I lay awake all night, tossing and turning and replaying the scene on the porch. By morning, I realized that I had lost my daughter, perhaps forever. But there was no alternative. I couldn't forgive her for selling the family jewelry, and I wasn't going to encourage her irresponsible behavior. On Saturday morning, around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang again, This time, it was Ethan. He looked terrible, unshaven, with red eyes, in wrinkled clothes. He was holding a small box in his hands. "Rosalind, hello," he said quietly. "May I come in?" "Of course, Ethan." "Come in." We went into the living room. Ethan sat down in an armchair and placed the box on the coffee table. "Charlotte came by yesterday," he said, without looking up. "She tried to get into the house, crying and screaming that it was all a misunderstanding, but I didn't open the door for her. She came to me, too, drunk, in tears, begging to stay the night." "And what did you do?" "I didn't let her in. I told her she had to return the jewelry first." Ethan nodded. "Probably the right thing to do. Rosalind, I want to apologize." "For what?" "For not protecting your daughter. For not noticing how she had changed. For allowing her to get to this state. Ethan, this has nothing to do with you. It was her choice, her decision. But I'm her husband. I should have suspected something, done something. Maybe then none of this would have happened." He picked up the box from the table. "Ah, I bought your jewelry. I spent all my savings on it, $4,000. But I couldn't let it stay at the pawn shop. I opened the box. Inside were my family jewels, a pearl necklace with sapphires and earrings. They looked exactly the same as the day I gave them to her." "Ethan!" I gasped. "You spent all your money? They were family jewels. They should be with you, not in a pawn shop." I couldn't let Charlotte sell them and do nothing about it. Tears welled up in my eyes. This wonderful man had spent his last money to correct my daughter's mistake. "Ethan, I can't accept this." "It's too expensive. Please take it." "It's important to me that it comes back to you. It's the only thing I can do to make up for what happened." "You're not to blame for what happened." "Charlotte is the only one to blame. I was a bad husband. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sought comfort with another man." "Ethan, stop blaming yourself. You were a wonderful husband. I saw how you loved her, how you cared for her. She just didn't appreciate what she had." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Ethan stood up. "I have to go. Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer said that under these circumstances, the case will be settled quickly." "What are you going to do next?" "I don't know. For now, I'm just trying to get through each day. Maybe something will change later." I walked Ethan to the door. "Ethan, you will always be like a son to me. If you need help or just need to talk, call me anytime." "Thank you, Rosalind. You're the only person in this whole story who has been honest." After he left, I sat in the living room for a long time, holding the box of jewelry in my hands. They were back with me, but at what cost? A ruined marriage, a lost daughter, the broken life of a good man. I went upstairs and put the box in the safe, next to other family valuables. Now I will never pass these jewels on to anyone. The tradition will end with me. My daughter proved unworthy of the family heirloom, and I will probably never have grandchildren. In the evening, Vivian called. "Rosalind, how are you? I've been thinking about you all day. Charlotte came back." "She came last night, drunk and in tears. Derek dumped her at the resort, and Ethan wouldn't let her in the house." "And what happened next?" "I didn't let her in either. I told her she had to return the jewelry first. She left cursing. And today, Ethan came by. He bought the jewelry for $4,000. He spent all his savings. He gave it back to me and apologized for not protecting Charlotte. My God! What a man! Does Charlotte know? I don't know. And I'm not sure she'll understand the greatness of his deed." "Rosalind, don't you regret not letting your daughter into the house?" I thought about that question. Do I regret it? Does it hurt? You know, Vivian, it hurts. It hurts a lot. But I don't regret it. Charlotte has to take responsibility for her actions. I can't protect her from that. What if she never comes back? Then I really have lost my daughter. But I didn't lose her yesterday on the porch. I lost her the day she decided to sell the family jewelry for a romance with a married man. After talking to Vivian, I sat by the window for a long time, looking out at the dark street and thinking about how quickly life can fall apart. Just a month ago, I had a daughter, a son-in-law, hopes for grandchildren, and family happiness. Now all I have left are memories and family jewelry that no one else will inherit. But I knew I had done the right thing. Sometimes being a good mother means not comforting and forgiving, but making adult children take responsibility for their actions, even if it causes pain to everyone involved in this sad story. In the end, I stated three simple truths. First, you cannot change the past, but you can change the future. Second, everyone has the right to their own boundaries. Third, a person's strength is manifested in the ability not only to forgive, but also to make decisions for themselves. Now I want to ask you, would you forgive or would you draw a line under it? Write your opinion in the comments and tell us where you are listening to us from.